Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and a share. Is WinterFest really an innocent festival, or is it the stage Leslie intends to use to expose the dark side of the Fairmont Crest community? To find out, stay with me and let's dig into it together. Leslie stepped into Ted's house with the feeling that she was dragging herself across forbidden ground, where every step stirred up memories she should have buried long ago. She was newly rich, newly arrived in the world of Fairmont Crest, but she had quickly realized that money wasn't enough to erase the scent of an outsider clinging to her skin. She had tried to buy a position, a title, a seat in this community in every way she could. Investing, sponsoring, showing up at the right events, smiling at the right moments. Yet just one cold glance, one half-hearted nod was enough for her to know she still stood on the edge of the circle, never truly belonging inside. And then, the harshest blow didn't come from strangers, but from the man she had once believed would at least understand her, Ted. The way he slammed the door of his family life shut, retreating into the image of devoted father, husband, and respectable doctor, while she was left alone with a child and a soiled reputation, made Leslie feel as if she had been erased from the story, existing only as a mistake that needed to be covered up. Convincing Anita to join the WinterFest organizing committee wasn't just a small victory. It was the first time Leslie felt she held a real weapon in her hands, a card that might buy her a bit of respect. Anita was not the type to be easily manipulated. She was the embodiment of the Fairmont Crest elite, powerful, fluent in the rules of the game, and someone who placed her family's honor above all else. When Leslie approached Anita, she wasn't merely begging for a chance. She brought with her a package of proposals that forced Anita to stop and weigh them. It might have been a generous donation to Anita's charity, a promise to turn WinterFest into the most talked-about event of the year using the network Leslie had painstakingly built outside of Fairmont Crest, or even sensitive information about sponsors and partners, things only someone who had been treated as an outsider would overhear. Behind half-closed doors, Leslie knew Anita would never soften for someone clinging at her skirts, so she chose to show up as a potential partner, not a weak supplicant seeking shelter. But when news of Leslie's involvement in WinterFest began to spread, the reaction from their old friends was nothing like what she had imagined. Instead of reluctant acknowledgement, Leslie felt the eyes on her growing sharper, and the more polite the greetings became, the colder they felt. Relationships that had once seemed warm when she first stepped into Fairmont Crest suddenly shifted tone, as if everyone was quietly asking themselves why Anita had agreed to let her lay a hand on one of the community's key symbols, and what price Leslie had paid to gain that position. The whispers behind her back, the gatherings she was no longer invited to, the little groups laughing together only to fall silent when she approached. All of it made Leslie understand that WinterFest was not just a charity event. It was a battlefield for sorting out who was family and who would forever be someone clawing at the door trying to get in. And on that battlefield, she stood in a position where she had only just managed to grip a weapon, yet suddenly found every aim turning toward her. Hurt and confused, Leslie came to Ted not only because she was lonely, but also because, deep down, she still believed that only he truly grasped the full nature of the story. He was the man who had once promised, whether silently or through unspoken understanding, that he would not leave her to face everything alone, that every bad decision had been the consequence of both of them, not just one side. But time had turned those promises into a double-edged blade. For Ted, every time he saw Leslie, he was reminded that his own hesitations and lack of decisiveness had broken his family apart, brought an innocent child into the world as a living monument to his mistake, and left his ex-wife in a state where she could never really know peace. The endless war between the ex-wife and the illegitimate child was not something Ted could resolve with logic or fairness. It was a storm of emotions of which he was both the eye and the cause. When Leslie stood in front of him now, wearing her wounds on her face, Ted didn't just see her pain. He saw his own reflection, the man who had pushed them both into this mess. And that was why his reaction became so harsh, to the point of cruelty. He lashed out at Leslie, piling accusations on her as if he could smother a spreading fire, when in truth he had been the one to carelessly strike the first match years ago. Inside Ted burned a rage he didn't dare name. He was angry at Leslie because she refused to disappear, refused to slip quietly out of the picture like a secret neatly wrapped and hidden away. He was angry that she now reappeared in his world not as a shameful footnote but as a person of influence, the one who had managed to pull Anita into a shared project. But more than anything, Ted was angry at himself for never having truly been decisive. Back then, he had never ended things with Leslie completely, never made it clear enough that what they had was a mistake that needed to be buried. He'd left behind gray areas, half measures of kindness, fleeting touches, guilty looks, all of which created the illusion that there was still something unresolved between them. Now that very illusion had come back to collect its debt, dragging everyone into a new spiral. Meanwhile, Leslie was forced to confront a question she herself didn't dare answer honestly. Was she truly suffering because she was hurt, or because the role of victim cast out by the Fairmont Crest elite gave her a morally safe position from which to continue the power game? The cuts inside her were real, the feeling of being labeled the homewrecker, the upstart woman trying to infiltrate a territory reserved for families whose names had been built up over generations. But alongside that pain, Leslie carried something else. An ambition to prove she was not someone easily discarded. Her decision to seek out Ted now was not only about wanting comfort. It was a test, a move on the board. She wanted to know whether he still wavered when confronted with her pain, whether the bridge between them had burned down completely or if there was still a single glowing ember left. If Ted softened, Leslie could use that sympathy to strengthen her own position, or, at the very least, turn it into a tool in the behind-the-scenes games, where Ted's name was still a powerful shield. Leslie choosing Anita, rather than any other powerful figure in Fairmont Crest, said a great deal about her strategy. Anita was both the moral symbol and the keeper of the keys to the community's core relationships. If Anita accepted Leslie, others could not openly oppose her without placing themselves against the very foundation of the community. Leslie understood this, so she didn't chase after people who were merely wealthy or noisy. She went straight for the woman at the center, the one whose voice carried the weight of a verdict. By persuading Anita to join the WinterFest organizing committee, Leslie didn't just climb one rung on the social ladder. She had acquired an invisible lever. As long as she could hint that she had been chosen by Anita, everyone else would be forced to ask themselves if they were missing something, if Leslie held a secret, an advantage, or a debt that Anita was obligated to repay. And in those muddy waters of doubt, Leslie began to feel that she was no longer entirely the weak one. But this kind of power is always fragile. It doesn't come from genuine respect but from the taut thread connecting rumor, suspicion, and fear. So when Ted refused to take her side, refused to offer even a small emotional anchor, Leslie felt as if she had been shoved away from the edge of her safe cliff and tossed headlong into empty space. She was wounded because he wouldn't acknowledge his part in all of this, but at a deeper level, she was wounded because she knew that without Ted's compassion, this whole game would only make her look even more like someone scrambling and clinging. Dark thoughts began to creep into her mind, possibilities she once would have considered beyond her limits. If she couldn't be loved, then at least she would be feared. If she couldn't enter Fairmont Crest as a fully accepted member, she would storm in like a disaster no one could ignore. On the other side, Anita was never simply the victim of persuasion. She had spent her whole life among layered social masks, and she knew the difference between a genuine offer of partnership and a threat disguised as an ally. Anita's decision to work with Leslie on WinterFest might have been the product of a cold calculation. It was better to keep Leslie within sight, giving her a sense of inclusion, than to push her out completely and let her become an unpredictable variable. Deep down, Anita may have seen Leslie as an emotional time bomb with a very short fuse, a newly rich woman with a child by Ted, being treated like a troublemaker who would not forever accept a place on the margins. Bringing Leslie into a controlled structure like WinterFest, under the watchful eyes of the entire community, was terrifying but also easier to monitor than letting her roam free. In doing so, Anita believed she was locking Leslie into a framework, but she did not realize she was also inadvertently handing her a stage. It is precisely at the intersection of pain and ambition that Leslie began to change. The initial feeling of heartbreak, when she came to Ted hoping for comfort, was gradually replaced by something else. The cold clarity of someone who realizes she has nothing left to lose. She looked back over everything that had happened. Being judged, excluded from gatherings, blamed for breaking a family apart, treated like a stain that had to be hidden. In the moment she understood that Ted would not stand beside her. She realized her pain had no meaning if it was only used to beg for pity. Pain only mattered when it became fuel. And if that fuel drove her toward revenge, toward dragging those who had once pushed her into the abyss down with her, then perhaps that too was a kind of twisted justice. From this point on, Leslie was no longer the woman quietly sobbing over her wounds. She began to study the cracks in Fairmont Crest's power structure with sharper eyes. She knew where Ted's ex-wife's weaknesses lay, what his family was trying hard to hide to preserve its perfect facade. She knew that Anita, for all her strength, still had her blind spots. The relatives she had to protect, the secrets from the past she didn't want anyone to dig up. WinterFest, built as a symbol of unity and charity, now appeared to Leslie as the perfect place for masks to crack with just the right nudge at the right moment. With her new role on the organizing committee, she could influence the guest list, arrange the seating chart, shape the content of speeches, even orchestrate a media incident if necessary. If Ted continued to keep his distance, refusing to intervene, he would inadvertently allow Leslie to act freely in a space he couldn't control. His rejection, instead of extinguishing the flame, would only push it to find a new way to blaze higher. Leslie, once purely the wounded party, was gradually shifting into the role of a threat. Not the loud, obvious kind, but a subtle, hidden danger wrapped in seemingly reasonable actions. A gentle nudge to a reporter, a leak of sensitive details about complex relationships within the community, a mistaken arrangement that brought two people who should never cross paths face to face in the middle of WinterFest's grand hall. Each small action, timed just right, could trigger a chain reaction that no one could pin directly on her. Caught up in this spiral, Ted would be forced to choose again. Either he wakes up and realizes that letting his self-loathing blend with his contempt for Leslie is only making everything worse, or he continues to watch from afar while his life is pulled into a clandestine war he helped lay the groundwork for. As for Leslie, once she has experienced what it feels like to be cornered and then discovered that she still has the ability to strike back, she will not easily return to being the fragile woman begging for compassion. The hurt inside her is still real, but from it something new has emerged. A cold resolve, ready to turn her own wounds into weapons. And in a world like Fairmont Crest, where every polite smile can hide a blade, a woman like Leslie, transformed from victim into a covert player, may well become the most dangerous twist of all, the one no one sees coming until it's far too late.